they got executives to measure their own stress levels when they were going through a career transition. And believe it or not, Ryan, those executives self-assessed their stress levels higher than those that were going through a divorce or a significant health challenge. Meaning, going through a career transition is more stressful than getting a divorce or being diagnosed with a significant health challenge.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Move the Chains podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Munsey. We are joined today by a fantastic guest, Navid Nazemian. Navid has been named the #1 executive coach in the world multiple times by CEO Today. His client list includes big names like BP, Caterpillar, Coca-Cola, and I'm not going to read the entire list because you'd probably skip along in the podcast, but it is an impressive and long list. Navid is also the author of Mastering Executive Transitions. He has more than 25 years of international experience supporting senior leaders transition most successfully into new roles. As an executive transition coach, he de-risks and accelerates their journey into the C-suite, enabling them to discover value to their organization while staying true to their authentic selves. Look, we're going to talk about leadership, identity, patterns, and real-world tactics that enable success at the highest levels of leadership, with an eye towards making sure that these takeaways are actionable and helpful for you at any stage of your journey. Navid, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for this warm welcome. It has to be one of the best I've ever heard about myself. I'm not sure my wife will agree with most of what you just shared, but hey, I'll take it as a win for today.
What is it about that proximity effect? The closer somebody is to us, the less they listen to us.
Well, let's skip the topic right away, or else you and I are going to get into a lot of trouble.
All right, so let's talk about, you're the #1 executive coach in the world, according to CEO Today, multiple times. I'm sure you have some ideas around what sets you apart from other executive coaches. What are you doing different from others?
Yes. So I'm not sure. I mean, I have an actual formula for how to get there. But see, the irony is, Ryan, I spent 20 years as a corporate executive leader working in the wonderful function of human resources. And in those 20 years, I did some really interesting work, and I think I had a good impact in my roles. Despite that, it was only on the day I announced my retirement from active duty as a corporate HR executive that I received my very first award. And so this is kind of my encouragement for coaches, leaders, whoever they may be. And sometimes it takes a long time for the universe to come around and really, recognize you for something. And it's really one that I will cherish for a long time to come, because that particular award, on the day of my announcement of retiring from active duty, was a peer recognition award, meaning I had a lot of fellow HRDs and CHROs who really, wrote up business cases on my behalf to make the case for why I deserve to become HR's most influential practitioner. And I think the same probably applies to my coaching practice. See, when I started out my journey back in the year 2014, it took me 8 years to win my very first coaching awards. And I've won 10 in the last 4 years. So sometimes just these things take their time. But for me, really, I mean, a recognition or an award is a nice thing to have. But really, what I'm really chasing and what I'm after in establishing and achieving is getting my clients the big, hairy, audacious results that they are wanting to achieve. And that, for me, is worth a lot more than being recognized by any of these fantastic institutions.
Yeah, that's I can appreciate that sentiment and that driving force behind what you do. How do you think your background in HR has influenced the way that you coach executives?
Oh, it has absolutely influenced my way of being. And I also train coaches in my own methodology, meaning they are already trained coaches. And when they come to me, my training program is called Certified Transition Coach. So I really help them to really ground themselves in the methodology and then to apply that with their own coaching clients. And one of the very first slides I have, which I, put up, it's a virtual program on Zoom, is a Venn diagram. And the Venn diagram has got three components. And the first one is coaching, which is an obvious one because I am an executive coach. The second one is mentorship, and the third one is advisory. And this is kind of at the intersection of those three disciplines is where I see my craft, which is very different than the puristic ICF way of coaching, where you are only allowed to ask insightful questions and have the client to come up with their own solutions. So at certain points in my coaching, if you were a client of mine and you're about to make a move that is absolutely going to be crushing your career, I will not hesitate to offer that up to you as an advice and say, Ryan, quite frankly, if I were you, I would not do that. And allow me to explain to you why. And then work back with you as a coach to say, okay, how might you approach this conversation with your boss differently? Or how might you approach this non-performing individual in your team differently? So that's exactly how I work and what I do.
Yeah, it's, as you talk through that, it's almost unfathomable for me to imagine a coach knowingly let their client go off a cliff like that.
Yeah, I mean, not really intentionally, but again, if all we are capable of doing is torturing our clients through insightful questions, session after session after session, then there may be something missing, and maybe that also explains my kind of way of working with the most senior leaders. I mean, quite honestly, I've never been a general manager or a CEO myself, and despite that, just the last 4 years where I'm doing this full time, more than 50% of the clients that come to do their work with me are CEOs and GMs. So, I do not have a lived experience of what it's like to be leading in a more general management capacity, but I certainly have worked with a lot of GMs and CEOs as an HR director and know a thing or two about how they work and what gets the best out of them and what may be not a good idea for them. So that's absolutely something that I bring into the way of working with my clients.
So the name of your book involves transitions, and a big part of what you teach or coach and advise in is a transition phase of a career. There's a stat that says nearly 40% of executives fail within the first 18 months. In your experience, what are the common reasons that happens? Is it culture? Is it identity shift? Is it something else? Lack of soft skills?
Absolutely. So the first time I came across the 40% number, Ryan, I thought this is surely a typo. It may be 4%. Or if it's really bad, maybe 14%. But 4 out of 10, 40% is a lot. Especially thinking about my own involvement in these processes, there's a lot of attention to detail, focus and energy that goes into hiring at the very top in any organization. And so it's an undisputed number because I cite 5 studies that all come to the very same conclusion, which is 4 out of 10 don't make it, which then brings us into this interesting question of what gets in the way. And so there are many reasons for why that is the case. And of course, I've dedicated an entire chapter just to this one question. But if I wanted to give your viewers or your listeners an idea around what these reasons may be, I mean, the first thing I say is I find that today's executives are exponentially challenged and finding themselves in a poly-crisis state, meaning it's not just this one issue or that challenge that they have to, grapple with. It's a combination of various factors, some of which are completely outside of their own control, that they have to deal with and give answers and lead entire organizations and teams through them. I mean, to use a very concrete example, I just started coaching a new client of mine. He's the managing director of the Middle East Africa region for a payment solution provider. And I met him yesterday for the first time in person. This was our first intake session. And of course, their business is immensely impacted because he looks after Middle East and Africa. And the Middle East region, I mean, today is the 24th of April, 2026, is dragged into a conflict, and especially the countries that, I have clients in, entirely without their own doing. And so that means that his business is affected by a regional conflict that is ongoing without him having any control or say whatsoever in that. And so, of course, they also provide payment solutions for travelers, and the travel business is down in the region because not too many people are considering this region to be safe to travel into right now. And so that is one of the reasons why this is so difficult. The second reason is what my good friend and mentor wrote in one of his books, which is titled "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," which is this, unshakable belief that if you have been transitioning successfully previously, all you need to do is to pull out the playbook and just play it all over again. And chances are this is going to be a good idea. The reality is it's rarely a good idea. There may be elements of your previous transitions that you are encouraged to bring into this current one, but chances that things are slightly, if not entirely different, are quite high. And so this is why when I wrote the book, I spent a good part of the 7 years that it took me from start to finish. I spent 5 years just researching the topic, to then come up with a framework that those executives and the coaches who work with them can actually apply. So I didn't want this to be just a research paper that, is very detailed in its research base, but I really wanted to have something that those leaders could take and implement and put into practice. And this is what ultimately resulted in what I call the double diamond framework of executive transitions.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'd love to have you maybe walk us through, like, you've got 7 phases of this double diamond framework. Can you walk us through what those are and maybe just a brief overview of each?
Sure. So this is my brain, Ryan. I don't know about yours, but I will never remember more than 3 things at a time. And so just to make my own life a little easier, I've picked those 7 phases in a way that if you were to take the first letter of the word of each phase and add them up, you will get to the word diamond again. That's how I remember my own stuff. So phase 1 is your day minus 90 to day 0. It's called Discover. And this phase, I cite the work of a great author called Michael Burrows, based in the US. He was a search firm partner with one of the largest search firms. And he wrote this great book. It's a super short, nice, little, simple book, 60 pages. And the book is titled Before Onboarding, Critical Strategies to Start Implementing Before You Are Appointed in a Critical Position. And so the idea that he has is so powerful, which is, why would anyone sit on their hands, wait patiently until they are appointed into a critical position, to then start running like crazy from day 1 and then drop the ball again on day 90, which is what the first 90 days is suggesting. So his idea is that there are many concrete actions that any incoming executive can take as soon as they have been announced to be the incoming CXO. As soon as it's safe for them to reach out to their future line manager or the incumbent to let them know that they will eventually take over from them. As soon as it's safe to reach out to their leadership team that they will be inheriting to introduce themselves and get a feel for who they will be working with. So there are so many things that the leader can do, and this is what entirely phase 1 is dedicated to. That brings us to phase 2. I call this phase Immerse, which is your typical day 1 to day 90. Again, nothing wrong with the first 90 days as a general concept. I just find that at the top of an organization, it takes 12 to 18 months to transition successfully. And this is why the first 90 days is only 1 out of the 7 phases. And as you can see by now, it's nowhere near sufficient to do just that and then have all the success coming your way. And there is a lot of literature, the first 90 days. There are many copycats of the same book. The first 100 days, the first 120 days, this and that. And I think it's really widely researched and well explained what is supposed to happen here. That brings us to phase 3. This is adapt. And this is your day 91 to day 120, roughly speaking. And this is where you need to start to demonstrate that you're able to adapt to the new position, the new organization, the new level of leadership, whatever it may be that you are transitioning into, without, justifying your own authentic self, without completely reverting into something else that you don't authentically do and feel and act. And so that is phase 3. That brings us then to phase 4. This phase is called mobilize. It's roughly 4 to 6 months into your executive position. And this is the phase that I titled mobilize, because again, chances are, Ryan, that you have been brought in to start to bring about some sort of a change, to lead on some kind of a transformation, to implement some big change to the organization. And this is where you need to start to really work with other senior leaders and other functions to really gather the troops behind the 2 or 3 big, hairy, audacious goals that you want to achieve eventually. So that is your 4th phase, titled mobilize. That then brings us to the 5th phase, which I titled operate. This is 6 to 9 months into your new position. And this is where you need to really start to act in a manner that is consistent with the big, hairy, audacious goals that you set on your organization in the previous phase. So you need to really now start to move all the machinery, all the people, all the resources, and all the energy of the organization into a similar, if not the same direction, in order to bring about the transformation that you are looking to establish. And that then brings us to the 6th phase. I actually used the good old Webster's dictionary to find a word that begins with the word N, because I was just not having anything coming to me freely. So this phase is titled nourish. And the nourish phase is your 9 to 12 months into a role. So you're almost a year into that new position. And this is where the rubber needs to hit the road. This is where you need to demonstrate to your organization that whatever you set out to achieve about 6 months prior to this is starting to come to fruition, is starting to move the needle in the right direction. Not quite fully yet, but you need to demonstrate early wins. Otherwise, people will start to lose their faith in your leadership and your mission and vision. And that then leads us to the 7th phase. If you think of the word diamond, it finishes with a D. And I titled this phase the develop phase. This is the phase where I will sit down with the executive leader and we will together review the last 12 to 18 months. What's happened? What did they set out to achieve? What, if any, from those goals were achieved initially? What went wrong? And more importantly, what are some of the key learnings they have as a result of those mistakes that they have made? And most importantly, if they were to transition at a future date, what are some of the embodied learnings that they want to carry into those transitions that are yet to come? And so that is just talking about the 7 phases of the Double Diamond. There's a lot more into it, but that's probably my 5-minute download of what is arguably 2 very thick chapters of my book.
Yeah, one of the things that I find myself teaching my clients is, the way I would phrase it is, expand your timeline or lengthen your horizon. And as I hear you lay out that framework, I can imagine, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, maybe pushback is the word, but I think if the average person is listening to this and they're hearing you say, wow, it's going to be 4 months before I start to mobilize. It's 6 to 9 months before I start to operate. And, the early wins show up at around 12 months. I think for somebody who is in their head being brought in to affect change and make a difference, that, as you pointed out earlier, so much of what we see is that has to be done in the first 30, 90, 100 days. And you've lengthened that timeline. And obviously that's improving the success rate beyond the industry normal of 60% off of that 40% failure rate. So can you maybe walk us through some of the pitfalls that occur when in a transition phase, someone attempts to mobilize, operate, see those early wins too quickly?
Sure, sure. I mean, what I haven't mentioned to you is the entry to the double diamond, which I call the five C's. And that exercise is exactly there to avoid what you refer to in an earlier part of this conversation as soft skills, right? Again, one of my often quoted statements is it's the functional or technical skills that gets you hired into the C-suite. And it's the lack of the soft skills that gets you fired at the same time. And so there's something really telling about that. And the example I want to use is as I said, Marshall Goldsmith's what got you here won't get you there. And this is kind of my way of working with that in a more analytical way. So the five C's are firstly, context, arguably the most important C of all, because it looks at the circumstances of the organization. It looks at the competition landscape, at the governmental, societal level, whatever this organization is faced with. The second C looks at culture. What is the culture of this organization? What about the culture of leadership here? And what are some of the, lived values in this organization? If I wanted to use two examples, 3M and Tesla, both arguably quite successful in their own relevant industry. But I think it's fair to say and assume that the culture is going to be fundamentally different in any one of those organizations if you compare them next to one another. The third C looks at commitments. What is the organization committed to achieving for its customers, clients, and society? So what are the ambition levels here, and what can we work with as an incoming exec? The fourth C looks at circles. By that, I mean circles of influence, circles of power, circles of informal decision-making. And again, one of the habits that I see oftentimes executives stepping into is that they map the key stakeholders when they are coming into the new position. And they only look at the senior level leaders and only at the senior titles. Chances are there may be some not most senior leaders who are very influential and vocal and whose opinions actually will, shift in one way or another. And so you also ought to have those on your radar and work them the same way you work your SVPs, EVPs, and the C-suite. And last but not least, the fifth C is titled confidence. This looks at the levels of employee engagement and the leadership DNA. And if I wanted to use this particular part of which I call the entry to the double diamond in a concrete way with you, Brian, if you were my coaching client, and assuming you're the CEO of Hewlett Packard, let's just make that up, and I would sit down with you, explain you the five C's, and your homework now is to go back and reflect on how every one of these five C's in your new position, and let's assume you have been externally hired into the HP, is going to be different than the previous role that arguably got you this big promotion in a different organization. And not only that, I would also want you to spend a little bit of time, just bullet points at this stage, nothing really research heavy, to think about what are some of the mitigation strategies that you want to put into place so that you don't walk on those landmines: context, culture, commitment, circles, and confidence. And what we will then do in an actual session, you come with your own bullet points and thoughts, and I will coach you through your plan as to how you can work on the context, the culture, commitment, circles, and confidence of your newly appointed position and sometimes organization. So that's just one way how you can not only de-risk the upcoming transition, failure, potentially, as well as you also help the executive to gain, speed, because these are very easy mistakes to make. And the more time they spend right up front to think about them and what the mitigation strategies are, the less likely they are to walk on those landmines and have to manage the blow up or the explosion of those.
Man, that is such a fascinating process. I can only imagine how successful that is. I mean, as you're talking through it, I recognize so many things that I've seen and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. There's a couple of ways I want to go with this. I think you mentioned, the functional skills that get you hired for that role often. Well, you didn't say this, but I think we know that as you transition into a larger and larger position of leadership, you're less of an implementer or doer and more of a leader of people, right? And that's again why those soft skills become so important. As individuals make that transition and have to do less of the things that they used to do in terms of implementing, what are some of the ways that you help new leaders, new executives either reframe their identity or maybe let go of some of those old patterns and kind of defaults of being that executor or implementer?
Sure. So I use my own framework here, and unlike what I just shared with you, which is the double diamond framework, which is really deeply rooted in research and so on, this particular one is just my humble assessment of working with 350 executives as a coach, and it includes working with thousands of leaders as an HRD prior to that. So I call this the 6 essential qualities of extraordinary leaders. And the 6 qualities I would like to point out to you are then mapped out on a spider web by the executive themselves, no judgment attached. So I ask them to rank themselves on these 6. And then I ask them, so that becomes their as is. And then I ask them the same question as to, okay, dear Ryan, what is the ambition level that you have with regards to these 6? Is there any one of these or all of them that you want to lift your game on? And then that becomes our high-level roadmap around what you called an identity shift, as in what is it that they need to step into so that they are more successful going forward and succeeding. And so the 6 qualities are, the first 2 are confident and self-aware. And these 2 are enhancing the self-leadership of the leader and helping him or her to expand their identity. I dislike politics, but if I wanted to use a very prominent example of a world famous politician right now, I think they have a lot of confidence, but not necessarily what I call the look in the mirror as to how's any of the stuff that I'm actually touting landing with the key audience here. So, and it's a very stereotypical thing, but I actually have seen a lot of executives who are suffering from the same disease. The next 2 are being connected and inspiring. So connected means that no matter what your seniority level is, you have no difficulty to connect with anyone in the organization, no matter their level of hierarchy. And inspiring means that you capture the attention of the audience. If you are in a one-on-one or if you're in a town hall, every single person that's in the room believes that you're speaking to them directly. And that's the energy that you exude by getting buy-in into the big mission and vision, rallying the troops, all that. These 2 are in the team leadership category. And the purpose behind these 2 is for the executive to enhance their impact. And that brings us to the last 2, courage and clarity. So this is the 5th and the 6th one. Again, I think it's quite stereotypical of think of some leaders who have a ton of courage, but not necessarily the clarity as to how to channel that energy and that power and that, influence. And so these 2 are in the business leadership category, because unless you work for an NGO, and even some big NGOs have results in their targets achievements, these 2 help you to elevate the results of a business. And so it's confident, self-aware, connected, inspiring, courage, and clarity that help the executive to start to think about what is my current state on these 6 and how would I like to show up in the future based on everything I know from this new position. And typically that new level of leadership requires them to show up in a different way and more skilled and confident. And it's not really about trading any one of these against one another. You have to think of this as a piano where you are encouraged to play the full, music and the whole song, and that requires you to know more than just one or two keys here and there.
Yeah, I love it. You mentioned earlier the enormous stress burden that executives face. What are some of the tactical things that you might use in a singular coaching session with an executive to manage stress? I mean, let's say you shared the date earlier. It's a Friday morning. Let's say you check in with one of your clients and they say it's been a hell of a week. What are some of the things that you might do to help them figure out, how to deal with it, and then also how to maybe prevent or put things in place to, manage their time, manage their stress load, delegate certain things? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So firstly, this is self-assessed level study where they ask top-level executives to self-assess their stress levels on a daily basis over a longer period of time. And they distinguish between those that were in their business as usual time. So, I mean, if there's ever such a thing as a BAU in an executive's life, but where there's no major drama coming their way, there's no big transformation, there's no transition happening at the same time. Yeah. And those executives were self-assessing the stress levels on a daily basis for, I think, 2 months. And some executives, as it happens, this is just life, normal human life that sometimes gets in the way, in that time period had to go through a divorce or a significant health challenge, meaning they were diagnosed with a bad disease, like something like a cancer, or they were, preparing themselves mentally to go through a chemotherapy or some really hard treatment phase. So they measured those, and then they got executives to measure their own stress levels when they were going through a career transition. And believe it or not, Ryan, those executives self-assessed their stress levels higher than those that were going through a divorce or a significant health challenge. Meaning, going through a career transition is more stressful than getting a divorce or being diagnosed with a significant health challenge. So there's this facts, data. Now, what I do, and this is why I said there's more to the double diamond than what we just covered. If you look at the 3 diamonds from the side, there's an arc on the top and an arc on the bottom. And the arc on the top says optimizing the energy levels of the leader. So, Ryan, I've seen this again and again and again. You have been appointed SVP, whatever finance function, and I sit in the same office as you, and I see how you're burning the midnight oil in your beautiful new corner office every single day. No such thing as a weekend for you, because guess what? You're always on your device, or you are attending calls with many important people, with analysts, investors, shareholders, board members, this, that, and the other, because guess what? During the week, there's just no time to do that. And 2 to 3 weeks into this state of mind, which is you're down to about 3 hours of sleep, and you have been going for 2 or 3 weeks on that sort of state of energy, chances are you are highly irritable, not just to your lifetime partner and to your children if you have those, but to every single person in the organization, including your boss and your direct reports. Forget about your peers. You're ignoring your peers at this stage. So what the optimizing energy levels of the leader suggests is the work of a gentleman called Tony Schwartz. And he wrote this fantastic concept into a Harvard Business Review publication. And he works with the 4 quadrants. And the 4 quadrants are spirit, mind, emotions, and body. And so that simple analogy is really what he's trying to establish, which is, of course, you could give more and more time to your new position. Chances are, if you go to the minimum of what is humanly possible so that you can function appropriately, you are only going to exacerbate the effect of that, and the stress is eventually going to grow on you too much. So his idea is, rather than giving more time, you ought to focus on these 4 quadrants, and with the support of a coach, such as yourself or myself, get into, okay, which, if any of these 4, need immediate attention. And by paying attention to that quadrant and bring them in balance, you are actually helping yourself to succeed, because what you're doing is not just giving more time to your role, but you're giving, replenishing and nourishing your energy levels.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great way of walking folks through what I found to be a very tough concept for career-driven individuals to understand. As you're talking through that, a phrase comes into my mind that I use a lot is, you can't give what you don't have. And another way of saying that is you can't pour from an empty cup. And so, it may on the surface feel selfish, but you have to do that in order to be able to continue to show up as your best self in whatever role is important to you, at work, at home, for your kids, your spouse, whatever. So I've never heard it quite explained in that way, but I do like that a lot. Navid, I want to circle back. You mentioned the T minus 90 days in the first phase of the Diamond acronym. I really love that. I don't think I've ever heard someone build that in so directly, but I come from a sports background, and I couldn't imagine a team not preparing in the preseason, right? I mean, no sports team is going to walk out on the first game of the season and be like, all right, well, let's see if our uniforms still fit or if our shoes are still in shape. And so, like, this idea of a preseason for a transition is, I guess it's something that I always just kind of took for granted. I'd love to hear, are there maybe two or three practical actions that someone should take in that 90-day window before their next transition?
Absolutely. And this is all, by the way, included in the workbook. Less than 1% of all thought leadership books have an actual workbook where the leader or whoever works with them can actually put this into a practical kind of action. So some of the typical activities that happens during the first phase that I call Discover are things like studying documents, right? I mean, you are the incoming CEO of Hewlett Packard, and there is an incumbent enrolled that you are going to replace 6 weeks from now. Let's just imagine. And so this is your moment now, Ryan, to sit down and study previous annual reports, looking and analyzing strategy presentations, going back on the main website, and as HP is a publicly listed company, there will be recordings of previous investor roadshow presentations. There will be recordings of analyst conversations and interviews with analysts as to what is our capital market strategy, for instance. There are many more things you could study at this stage. Employee engagement surveys. Or, if you are inheriting a leadership team, which is quite likely you will inherit the X-code that's already in play in the company, this is your moment to ask the HR person to share with you the talent rating and the succession planning documents of those involved. Maybe also including their total remuneration packages, just to make sure that you have already a good idea around how much everyone is earning and what is it that about the market and their current positioning and so on. I often have executives, and because I do this work a lot with CEOs, they know that they are the incoming one. And then there is like a big event already pre-planned before they're appointed, such as a strategy offsite with the board. Now, it would be foolish, Ryan, if your job only starts on the 1st of June and today is the 24th of April. If the strategy session is planned in 2 weeks' time that you don't attend because you're not in charge, actually, right? There's someone else involved. It would be a missed opportunity for you not to jump on that strategy offsite, even if it's just as a silent observer, to make sure that you understand the strategy of the organization. In an ideal way, if that's really the role you're going for, they would not want to hold the strategy offsite until you can come in and contribute in a meaningful way. So, this is the time where you can start to have meaningful conversations with critical stakeholders. This is the time where you can reach out to your predecessor, who's the incumbent, and establish an understanding of what they make of the role and what are the biggest challenges and opportunities they see in the role, And of course, you will have to take it with a pinch of salt because you will come to it in a fresh way anyway. So this is everything. I love the sports analogy of the preseason that you can do in the preseason so that when you are in a position, which is phase two, you have already covered a lot of ground before you are actually going.
I'm sitting here nodding my head and smiling the whole time you're explaining that. I love this. It's so, like, I guess when I think about this personally, like I've never been good enough at anything to just show up and have success to the degree that I would want. So preparation has always been a huge part of my repertoire. And I love the way that you have codified it and built it into, this process that you're teaching folks so that it's so, I don't know. I don't want to demean it or downplay it, but it's to me, it's I don't want to say it's simple, but it's like, how would you not accept a role with that much responsibility and not do anything until day one? So anyway, Navid, this has been a really fun interview. I love hearing how you do what you do. Again, the book for people listening, Mastering Executive Transitions, as you pointed out, there's a phenomenal workbook with it. We'll get to some rapid fire questions here. I'd love to hear, you mentioned quite a few books already that you've enjoyed. What is the most impactful book that you've ever read?
I guess I really enjoyed reading that book. I would have a hard time to say it's the most, but it's the one book I would recommend any leader to read. It's called The Coaching Habit, and it's written by a fellow coach called Michael Bangay-Stanier. And his simple but beautiful idea was that you don't have to train up to become a professional qualified coach to be more coach-like in your daily leadership actions and interactions and relationships. And so I just love the simplicity of that book. And again, like my book, it's very accessible. It's not something that you need a PhD to read and understand, or you need to be a qualified coach to make sense of it. You can be any leader and you will benefit from reading this book and adding a different style to your style of leadership.
I love it. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, 2 a day though, and nothing post 2 p.m.
Okay. That's the only correct answer, by the way. If you could have coffee with any leader throughout history, dead or alive, who would you have coffee with?
Oh, it would have to be Nelson Mandela. I mean, I had the honor of, finishing my 3-year coach education training with a thesis, and we were encouraged to write about someone who has been at the level of mastery in whatever they do. And despite the fact that I do not like politicians and politics and all that, I just found it to be a fascinating case study to really explore and learn more about someone who's been leading with humility and vulnerability and very successfully so.
I love it. All right, this one may be a little on the spot, so if you want to pass, feel free. But best organization or organizational culture that you've ever experienced, and what about it makes it stand out for you?
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, Ryan, I work for Adidas, I work for GE, I work for Roche, these are all champions in their own rights. But the one that I would like to point out here is the most recent one. Vodafone is the name of the company. And if people don't know what Vodafone is, they used to own 40% of the shares of Verizon Wireless in the US. So they are a telecommunication player, similar to Verizon Wireless, AT&T, and so on. And what I loved about that organizational culture was what actually drew me to, accepting the offer letter. When I sat down with the CHRO and I did my own research on the company, I learned that for a period of 4 years in a row, they had the highest levels of engagement across the 101,000 employee population across the 24 markets that we're operating in. So it was really intriguing for me to learn more about how can an organization sustain those highest levels of engagement? higher than Google, higher than Apple, higher than Adidas, higher than many other organizations out there. And guess what? When I joined them and I stayed for 8 years, for 6 years after I joined them, they continued to have those highest levels of engagement, even throughout the pandemic. And it was something quite magical and something I really, really cherished to the maximum, to also contribute in a small way, but really learn about how you can nourish and maintain a high performance culture in an organization size of the Vodafone that it was. It was just the most fascinating, grateful for the opportunity. And it was just a case study that I will cherish for the rest of my life.
That's incredible. What was like, if there's one takeaway from that experience that you would make sure you installed in a company of your own, what would be that Vodafone secret sauce?
I think it was the right mix of leadership and autonomy. I always used to joke with friends after I joined the company, and they were curious to hear what is it like to be inside the system versus what you see the shiny, stuff outside from the outside. And I said, I feel like I'm my own toilet cleaner and CHRO in the same person. And it literally was like that. I mean, I did not have the huge number of, EAs and PAs and what I used to have. I did not have a huge amount of budget. But that being said, if I had the right idea, if I had the right business case, funds were unlimited. If I really felt that this initiative makes sense for this function and I could make the case, sky's the limit. You could just go and implement. And so I didn't really have to go back and check, is that included in my mandate or brief? Is that expected of me? Is that part of my job description or anything like that? Do I need to check that with line managers so that they are comfortable with it? It was really the perfect recipe between, as I said, leadership and autonomy at the same time.
That's really cool. I bet that was a really special opportunity to get to do that for 8 years. Navid, where can our listeners get more of you?
Look, it's super simple. I have one social media platform that I cherish to the max, that is LinkedIn. I have a large following. I'm a blue badge holder, and I actually manage my own account. So I don't have a VA. It's me who actually responds to connection invites and messages. And I also have a newsletter that has right now over 8,000 weekly subscribers. And of course, if anyone wanted to, dive into my book, it's available anywhere you can buy books from.
So for people listening, we'll have links to all of those things in the show notes, the description of the video on YouTube, wherever you're listening. Just go down to the notes and we'll make that really easy for you to follow up and get connected with Navid. As always, thank you guys for listening. Appreciate you being a part of the Move the Chains podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone that you know who will benefit from the things that we've talked about here today. Navid, thank you again for your time and all the best to you.
Thank you.